when I was a Corps officer, I had a women's ministry that was just floundering. I mean, 7, 8 women, and they fought all the time, and they were hypercritical. And you couldn't even grow a healthy group of people because there was so much lack of health there. And so one of the things I did that really did make a difference is I made the determination that nobody could be in leadership of that group unless they were being actively discipled in a women's leadership disciple group. And I got some material, and we started. There were like 3 or 4 of us, and I had actually invited someone who was not a Salvationist, but who often came alongside and helped with women's ministry to be a part of that. And so the 4 or 5 of us would meet every week, and I started with the basics. We started with a little book that walked you through what you knew about the scriptures, what truths you really knew, and things like that. And then we just started right where people were, talking about what it meant to be a Christian, what it meant to love God, what are practices that help us draw close to Him, what are disciplines in our lives that would help us in this knowing God better kind of thing. And the thing that really, really amazed me, 2 things. First of all, was the women who didn't want to be a part of the group but wanted to be a part of leadership, pretty soon wanted to be a part of a group because they realized they were losing power. And I did do a group with them. And just a side story of that, so I'm in this group. It's 2 women who have caused a lot of problems. And they're not in the leader group because they're not leaders, but I did a discipleship group with them because they felt left out. So we did this little discipleship group. Yep, okay. Just the 3 of us. And I'm going through this first book with them, which just asks basic questions. And it happened to be a mom and a daughter. And we're in the nursery at the Corps, and I get to the question that says, if you were to die today, are you sure that you would spend eternity in heaven? And these 2 women, 70s and 50s, looked at me and said no. And I had the great privilege that day of leading that 70-something-year-old mom and her 50-something-year-old daughter to the Lord. They had been Salvationists their whole lives, and they had never made that heart commitment. They'd made a membership commitment, but not a heart commitment. And so, long story short, they were beautiful in their babyhood of their Christianity. And Barb, the daughter, I mean, she was just a piece of work. She would make these, she would revert into old behaviors and old habits, and then I'd say, Barb, and she'd say, oh, Major Tricia, I do love Jesus. I do love Jesus. And she just continued to grow in the Lord. And she was never going to be, perfect. None of us are, but she really came to know what it meant to belong to Christ. That women's group flourished and grew. And by the time I left that appointment a couple years later, we averaged in the 25 to 30s in that group. And they were happy women, enjoying community with one another. And by that time, we had the leadership discipleship group, but then we also had some other discipleship groups for the women that wanted to participate. So I think discipleship has to start with, how do I know Jesus? Not how do I know how to be a member of this church, or how do I know how to act like a Christian, but how do I know Jesus? If I can get to know Jesus, if I can introduce someone else to Jesus, the Holy Spirit will do the work in their life as they grow in that, and we will have a powerful church.